Okay, so I can tell you, I was talking to a man yesterday who is, he's 120 pounds overweight and a young guy, and so remarkably interested in getting this problem solved early. And and so he was wanting to have rules and expectations, and I just said, no, no, I'm not interested in rules and expectations. I'm going to tell you the only thing that you need to know. Okay. The only thing that you need to know is that if you eat 1,000 pounds of wet starch in the next year, you will be thinner than you are now. Okay. If you do not eat 1,000 pounds of wet starch in the next year, you're going to look pretty much the way you look now. So that's all I care about is the fact that he needs to go eat 3 pounds of wet starch a day for the rest of his life. And the whole point here is that this doesn't matter when we get there. Your weight is an equilibrium of really 3 variables: your genetics, your diet, and your exercise level. So those are the 3 variables, and only one of them is a variable within your life, which is your diet and your exercise level. Your genes are fixed to you. So however, they're a major variable in determining what this problem looks like for you. So if you have medium genes, then you got a medium level problem. If you've got very thick genes, you've got a thick problem. And if you've got skinny genes, you've got no problem at all with respect to excess weight. So but that's all I care about. Because I care about when I look at somebody's weight situation, I kind of want to know those things. I want to know, I can tell their genes by asking them. I don't need to know about their family. All I need to know about is their history. So if someone's been over 100 pounds overweight, I already know they've got very thick genes. You're already in the top 10 percentile for essentially efficiency of storing fat. And then if they say, well, I was on the McDougall program and I lost 50 pounds and then I'm still 50 pounds overweight. It's like, okay, you've reached equilibrium, and that's all. So all that told me is that your diet and your exercise behavior reached equilibrium. So that's all that happened, and then that's where we've landed. And they're like, well, I don't see anything I'm doing wrong. It's like, well, all depends on what we want to call it at that point, but there is something that we can do to change you off of that equilibrium, because you're not biologically determined to be 50 pounds overweight. That is an unnatural state of affairs. And therefore, what we need to do is we need to determine what it is that equilibrium, what are we willing to shift? So an important way that I look at this, Gustavo, is I want to find out what people are willing to do that is better than what they're doing now. That's what I want to know. Okay. And whatever that is, that's what we're going to go for. We're not going to say, well, okay, I desperately want to be completely rail thin and super, super svelte. It's like, okay, well, I know how to do that. And that is what we're going to eat: nothing but whole natural foods, completely unprocessed. You're going to get up in the morning and you're going to get a 45-minute workout in the morning and a 45-minute workout, in the afternoon. And this is what you're going to eat. You're going to eat a huge salad, a bunch of steamed vegetables, some fruit, and a couple of starches. And that's that. And you're going to do that for the rest of your life with no exceptions. It's like, well, do you want to do that? Because if you really want to be, very low fat content on your body, we can get you there. I don't care if you're 427 pounds. I can get you there, but it's only 1 in 10,000 people that is willing to have such a regimen. And I have a feeling that you're not one of those 1 in 10,000. So maybe we should ask of what it is that you're doing now, what you would be willing to change. And then we're going to go see if you can change that. And we're going to work at that for a while. And if we make that change, then we're going to sit back and watch it for a year, for example, and see until we hit equilibrium. Okay, so this young man basically has been fiddling around at 315 pounds. And he fiddles around and he loses a couple pounds from getting clean, and then he comes back and goes back and goes back, just as you'd expect, as his brain is wrestling with the cost-benefit analysis of how clean to live. And my response is, well, if you're ever going to be anything that isn't going to look like 315 pounds, you will need to be eating 3 pounds of starch, wet starches a day, no matter what else you do. If you're eating some ribs now and then, if you're eating some cupcakes now and then, those are extraneous details of interest later. But the thing that's critically important is, are you going to be eating 3 pounds of wet starches a day? Because if you don't do that, I know for sure what will be replacing it. Okay, I know that what will be replacing, if you only eat 2 pounds of wet starch a day, then I know that the third pound is not going to be salad and fruit. I know that the third pound is going to be vegan pizza, chicken wings, peanut butter sandwiches. In other words, it's going to be something that is not a whole natural food. It's going to be something that's going to be very, very rich. It's going to be vastly higher in calorie density than the wet starches that I'm telling you that need to be there. It's going to be 1,500 calorie pound food instead of 500 calorie pound food. And you're going to be eating an extra 1,000 calories a day as a result of that. And that's how you're going to maintain that 315 pounds. So that is what the discussion needs to focus on. What is the difference between what you're doing now and what it is that you're willing to do? What is the most obvious thing that you are willing to make a change on? And then we make that change and then we watch it very carefully. So let me give you an example to follow up your question that is super important. So let's suppose I have somebody that was a conventional eater and was 100 pounds overweight, went to a McDougall diet, lost 50 pounds, and there they sit. And they've been sitting there for a year and a half frustrated. And they're like, well, my friends tell me keto is better, and what should I do? Okay, what I would do is I'd say, okay, now let's look at the next thing on the list that you're doing, and let's find out what's the next thing that you are willing to make a change on. Okay, so let's suppose person doesn't do any exercise at all, and I'm gonna say, okay, your diet's a little rich. We're gonna, but you're not sure you're willing to make any, you feel hesitant that you might not be willing to make any significant changes there. Okay, so, but you're not doing any exercise at all. Okay, so now we're gonna have you walk around your block once a night. That's what we're gonna do. You think you could do that? Yes, I could. I could do that. That wouldn't be too bad. My knees are okay. All right, so now we're gonna do that. And we're going to do that for the next 4 months. And we're going to see whether or not that makes any difference in your weight. Now, why would we run the experiment for that long? Because after all, when the person would change to the McDougall program, they lost 4 pounds a month. And they're like, hey, shouldn't I be losing? It's like, well, no, you've reached equilibrium. And so now we're going to make a change in what it is that you're doing day to day. And we might lose maybe a pound a month. So in 4 months, we might be able to detect a 4 pound weight loss. And so that's our experiment. We're just going to make that change. It's a change that you're willing to do forever anyway. And let's see whether or not that will cause us to experience a 4 pound weight loss in the next 4 months. If it does, great. Then we don't have to change anything else. We're on our way. We're down to 46 pounds. We may be in 2 years, we may drop 25 pounds and you may be happy with it. But if 4 months from now, we haven't dropped any weight at all, then we're going to have to change something else. Okay. The amount of, hold on one second. The amount of weight that people are going to lose has to do with how much have any of the variables changed. So the genes haven't changed. How much has the diet changed? How much has the exercise level changed? A lot of times the exercise level doesn't change that much. So now the question is, how much has the diet changed? Well, if the diet has changed from 1,000 calories a pound to 700, that is a tremendous change. So that's a conventional diet down to a standard McDougall diet, maybe down in that range. Okay, that's good. Now, what if we go from a standard McDougall diet down to an ultimate weight loss diet? Well, we've probably gone down from 700 to 600 calories a pound. Gotten rid of a few nuts, a few avocado, a little bit of whole wheat bread, maybe some pasta. But we're still eating the same potatoes, rice, and beans. We're still eating the fruit. We're still eating vegetables, and we're still eating salad. So it hasn't changed that much, but it's changed maybe 100 calories a pound. So now what we expect the rate of change to be? Very slow. So since the change has been subtle, the change in your body should be subtle. And the change in your body might take, for example, a year. So maybe that difference might cost us 15 pounds permanently of weight loss, but it's going to take a year for it to show up. So it's only going to be a pound and change a month. And so that's why after 6 weeks, when you've only lost 1 pound, you're like, well, it doesn't even make any difference. It's not working. Oh, no, you can't tell yet. Okay, so we have to understand that subtle dietary changes will result in subtle bodily composition changes. Dramatic dietary changes will result in dramatic body composition changes. You have to know how big the dietary change is relative to your overall calorie density of your diet in order to anticipate how much weight might be lost. In the final year of her weight loss, Chef AJ was losing about a pound a month. Okay, so that's it. So she's going to lose about 3 pounds a month for the first year and lose about a pound a month for the next year. So that's how that goes down. That's how that works. All right.
Yeah,
hopefully that's helpful.
that's really good, Dr. Lisle, because so many people want to be losing 10 pounds a month for a whole year. It's like it takes time.
Yeah, there are people that will. So
Yeah,
I've had many
yes,
people that were 100 or 150 pounds overweight,
yes,
and they weren't necessarily genetically as bad off as you would have thought. Their diets were horrendous. So they were an extra 100 pounds overweight, but they earned every pound of that through, chocolate cheesecake and greasy pepperoni pizza.
all right,
So their diets were extremely rich. And when they shifted to a good diet, they started dumping weight like crazy because
right,
it turned out their genes really weren't that, they weren't at the 99th percentile genetically. They were only at the 85th percentile genetically.
right,
And so as we got a decent diet, they actually did lose weight at that rate. But
yes,
that's rare. I mean,
right.
I would say for people that are 100 pounds overweight, that isn't rare. It's just uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
More likely, you're going to lose 4 or 5 pounds a month.
Right.
Might take you 2 years to dump 100 pounds. Yeah.
At the beginning, when I had about 100 or 90 pounds to lose, I was losing 8 pounds a month for a good 4 or 5 months. I was doing that, and then I started to reach equilibrium, like you say.
Yes.
And,
yes.
You have to start either have a coach or someone to help you, or you yourself figure out, okay, now what can I change? So I started taking out a few things that now I really didn't care for anymore because my way of eating had changed, and so it was easier to give up bread, let's say, than it should have been at the very beginning, or
right,
or nuts and seeds, things like that.
Right.
But would you just, would you, for clarification for some people here, define what a wet starch is?
Yes. Yeah. I'm apparently the only person using the term. It's frustrating.
It's good. It's a good term. I like it.
Wet starch is going to be things like rice, beans, potatoes. So you don't eat rice dry.
Right.
You could eat it once it's cooked, and then you have a rice cake, and now you're eating a dry starch. Okay. But if you eat a bowl of rice, that's wet. There's water inside of it. Oatmeal is going to be wet unless you have an oatmeal bar. Now it's been dried out.
Right.
So, in other words, starches, typically we're going to cook them in water rice, beans, and potatoes. So a bunch of dried beans. You can't eat dried beans. You're gonna have to cook them. They're gonna have to be, and the cooking process breaks down the starch molecule. It's called gelatinizes it. That's when it pulls in a bunch of water and expands. It's way bigger. Spaghetti, for example, is a wet starch. The bread is a dried starch. So bread and spaghetti are the same biochemically, but they are different in the sense that the spaghetti is wet and the bread is dry. So bread is this very same material there. The bread is about 1,600 calories a pound. The spaghetti is 900. Big difference, okay? Your ancestors, your digestive system is designed by nature around wet starches. You can tell that we can tell that we're a big starch eater by how many genes we have for the code for the manufacture of amylase, which is the enzyme that breaks down starch. So I think we have 28 genes or something like that. It's a lot of genes. Clearly a big starch eater. Now we're designed by nature to be hunters and gatherers as well. So the vegan folks who think that we are genetically designed to be herbivores are incorrect. It's not true. I believe that we are better off health-wise being an herbivore, but 50,000 years ago, the animal food was an important resource to have between you and starvation, for goodness sakes. And so, so human beings are designed to eat this and like it, and but it is in fact a problematic food that's associated with long-term chronic disease processes later in life. So I have not to mention, I mean, animal rights is a whole different issue. But the point is that from the standpoint of ideal health, I believe the evidence is pretty strongly on the scale of a vegan diet being just outstanding and probably ideal. Right. So however, that vegan diet would have been averaging, a natural foods diet of our natural history would have averaged somewhere in the general ranges of 500 to 700 calories a pound. You can tell this, an average guy is going to eat about 4 pounds of food a day, and he's going to eat about 2,500 calories. We know this. You can measure this in everybody's urine. You know exactly how many calories they're eating or how many calories they're burning. And so that would be about 625 calories a pound, for example. So there is no exact number, but if people's diets got under 500 calories a pound, those were getting pretty lean. Okay. If they got over 700 calories a pound, they were sitting in some very high cotton. Those were unusually good circumstances. So the major foods that they were eating would have averaged, call it 600. So if we look at some major constituencies of the human diet, we're going to find that certainly people got fruit when they could, which is 300. Vegetables were important. Those were 200. Salad vegetables, they're only going to grab a handful of that. That's not that important, but that would only be 100 calories a pound. So what they were going to eat is, quote, meat and potatoes. So the animal food would be 800, and the starches are going to be somewhere around 400 or 500. So potatoes are 375, beans are 400, rice is 500. You're going to expect a huge component of the diet is going to be coming from the wet starches. Now, they could eat some dry starch, and so they could have some rough-looking bread that they've cooked it and then they've eaten it dry, because now at dry it's up there at 1,500 calories a pound. So it becomes a very rich facsimile for meat, but they probably didn't do a lot of that. They probably got their average calorie density up by eating honey, as well as occasional nuts and seeds. So this is where it is that a diet that's super clean, that doesn't have anything north of rice, is a diet that's unnaturally lean. It's unnaturally thin. And so it could be a very good diet, but the problem is that people that eat such a diet are always riding on the ragged edge of starvation. In other words, and very often if people will do this dutifully and thinking that this is the way to, quote, live, if they do this, after 6 weeks, they can get ravenously frustrated, and pretty soon they're eating a box of donuts, okay? Or very commonly, they've got their big spoon in a peanut butter jar, okay? So these are the kinds of problems that come up when you get the diet overly lean, more so than would have been consistent with natural history. That's why I want people to not be so extremely fastidious at just, but wet starches still need to be the center. They need to be the biggest thing that you're eating physically. They are, so if you're a typical person, ought to be looking to eat on the order of 3 pounds of wet starches a day, i.e. rice, beans, and potatoes. Rice, beans, potatoes, pasta, oatmeal, those are things like that, they're averaging about 400 calories a pound. So 3 pounds of it is going to take you to 1,200 calories. If you're an average woman, you're going to eat about 2,000 calories a day. So we've now covered all but 800. So now we have a pound of fruit at 300 and a pound or two of vegetables at a couple hundred and some salad. And now we're still awfully lean there. And that's why we have room for some things that are a little bit richer that essentially make your diet more interesting. Pasta, for example, is 900 calories a pound in its wet noodle form. However, you don't eat straight pasta. Hopefully you eat it with tomato sauce, which is only 200 something calories a pound. So when you put those together, it's about 600 calories a pound. That's fine, okay? Hopefully if you eat a salad, maybe you put a half an avocado on it. Avocado is 900 calories a pound. The rest of the salad is 100 calories a pound. And some other things you put on it, beets or kidney beans or 200 or 300 calories a pound. But the avocado is not going to massively increase the calorie density of that salad. But what it does is it actually feeds the animal a little bit of what it is that it's looking for, which is something that looks sort of like meat. And meat would have been 800 calories a pound, avocado at 900. They are effectively very close facsimiles, okay? Tofu, if anybody likes it for anything, is an interesting material that is about 500 calories a pound. So it's on the rich side of the starches, but it's relatively high in fat. So it essentially becomes a pretty good facsimile for meat, even though it's down at 500 calories a pound. So these are the types of things that, in other words, I'm not looking to be eating fruit, salad, steamed vegetables, and wet starches. If you do that exclusively, you're going to be averaging about 400 calories a pound or 300 calories a pound, probably more like 300, which means that you're going to be eating 7 pounds of food a day of exceedingly low fat content. And you will probably, if you actually did that, you would get rail thin. And if women did that, most of them would lose their menstrual cycle. In other words, this is, it can be done. And you can actually eat enough because you don't have to go get it because you can get it at a store. You can actually eat such a diet, and it's a very healthy diet, but it is not the diet that mimics well your natural history. And so your internal process will be one of constant chronic caloric frustration, okay? And constantly being lured by higher density calories that you think are naughty, but the truth is are absolutely consistent with your natural history of spiking your diet with occasionally higher calorie density foods. So, so it makes a difference. In other words, I'd rather be spiking my diet with avocado and pasta than with peanut butter sandwiches. Because a peanut butter sandwich, which is a very benign looking thing and perfectly fine health-wise, but from the standpoint of weight, think about what that is. Peanut butter is way a natural food up there at 3,000 calories a pound. The bread is 1,600. You put honey on it, which is 1,800. That peanut butter sandwich is about 2,400 calories a pound. which makes it 3 times the calorie density of steak. Okay, so this is where it is that very many vegans' dietary programs hit the wall, because they get actually overly ambitious in thinking that they need to be eating everything, quote, left of the red line. In other words, everything less than 500 calories a pound. And the truth of the matter is, no, 500 or 600 or 700 calories a pound was the average, not the top of what our ancestors ate. So I want people to be aiming at around 600 calories a pound just conceptually, which means that you're going to have some things that are richer than 600 calories a pound. You're going to have some pasta, you're going to have some avocado. You will occasionally have some dried carbohydrate if you're not going to have any animal food, which I think is a good idea. So that's why we don't have to be perfect. We want to be aiming in this range of 600 calories a pound. That should be highly sustainable psychologically, okay, in a way that 400 calories a pound is not. And so my attitude is, let's go find out what happens to you when we aim there. Now we're going to go back to my story of my young man. So the young man has blown hot and cold for 5 days at a time, because he has understood that the right thing to do is to eat salad, steamed vegetables, and fruit, and cooked starches, whole starches. Well, that averages out to about 300 calories a pound. So you can imagine what this young man is thinking after about 5 days. He's ready to eat a pepperoni pizza all by himself, which is exactly what happens. Okay, so right. Instead, the idea is, no, we are not trying to turn you into a saint that eats 300 calorie pound diet. We're turning you into a classic hunter-gatherer starch-based animal that is going to be aiming at 600 calories a pound. And if we do that, I'm not going to worry about the other things that you do. But I know that if I don't worry about you getting 3 pounds of starches, I know we're going to be filling up with the pepperoni pizza instead of filling up with rice, beans, and potatoes. Big difference. So if you eat some pepperoni pizza on top of it, you're not going to be eating that much pepperoni pizza. So let's go there for the next year and find out what happens to your weight. And if he'll do that, we'll wind up at 240 pounds or something, and then we'll be looking at the next phase at that point. Okay.
Right.
So hopefully that's a useful ideas for people.